What's up, everyone? I'm KMBest. I hit Infinite a couple days ago, and the deck that I used is really giving me some bad feelings about Marvel Snap right now. And I just wanted to talk about why, and talk about why the conversation around Marvel Snap has drifted towards pay to win and free to play since the release of the Savage Lands season, which came with this card, Zabu, on the Battle Pass. And this is the deck I used. I don't know that it's the best Zabu deck, but what I do know is the climb was pretty easy, and it is extremely expensive to play. Now, I know people are going to ask, why is it so expensive? What do you mean expensive? Can't you get all these cards for free? And it's like, well, yeah, eventually. But right now, this card right here costs 6,000 collector's tokens. This card right here costs 6,000 collector's tokens. And this card right here costs 10 bucks. So, and then in 2 months, that'll also cost 6,000 collector's tokens. And what bothers me about this specifically is there's a lot of good Zabu decks you can play. Like, for example, you could play this, which another streamer, Dara JN, was playing. It's a much cheaper version of Zabu. This is like a much more early free-to-play version of Zabu. Zabu still costs $10, though, right? And that's a little weird. And so when you go back to the list that I'm looking at, my climb got a lot easier basically as soon as I unlocked this thing. This thing costs 6,000 tokens. I started the season with 3,000 because I stupidly spent 6,000 tokens on Null. And so I ended up having to spend a significant amount of money in order to acquire this card so I can make my climb easier. And that's not good. And I think this is worth pointing out in light of the comments that Ben Brode recently made about how they want to see, you know, everything get into the full rhythm. Like, once you finish the collection track, you'll be getting like a pool 5 cards worth of collector tokens a month, right? And I can tell you right now, I'm in that position, and it does not feel good. I am getting a pool 5 card every month for free, and it's still bad. So I want to be clear about that. I am in the position that they are talking about waiting and seeing until you're in that position, and I can tell you I don't like it. So what does that mean for anything else? Like, I'm really not sure, right? Like, I think the idea is, you know, a free-to-play player can get a card a month, right? And that might be fine for a free-to-play player. But if you're paying to win, you spend $200 extra, you get 1 extra card a month. It's a little iffy, right? So this deck sort of prompted me to look for, like, what would the free-to-play alternatives be? And that also brought me to a question of, what is free-to-play? Because I personally don't think that, like, this deck very obviously is not free-to-play. Is free-to-play all the cards in Series 3? Is free-to-play all the cards in Series 3 plus, like, you know, maybe you spend a little bit on the Battle Pass? Maybe it doesn't have to be strict free-to-play. What I'm trying to get a gauge on here is, what are the people, what are the spending habits of the people that watch my videos? And what sort of content, what sort of a level of spending content would they be interested to looking into, right? Because I think this deck here is very clearly beyond the pale. It is not something that probably 99% of the players in this game can play. What is free-to-play content? What is budget content? What does that mean? And I think my worry is that this deck represents a sort of fundamental problem with the acquisition model in Marvel Snap. Now, if you're willing to zoom out with me for a minute here, I know a lot of people will be like, oh, well, of course they released a card that buffs 4-drops. They put 2 expensive 4-drops in the game. I don't think that's how it worked. My best guess as to why this situation is the way it is the timeline on which these cards were supposed to be released into the game got messed up, right? Shuri was supposed to be in the game like a month ago, maybe 2. And because of the delays with getting the token shop out and the failure of Nexus event, the timeline on which these cards were supposed to be released into the game got messed up, right? Shuri was supposed to be in the game like a month ago, maybe 2. And because of the delays with getting the token shop out and the failure of Nexus events, she ended up coming into the game now. If she only cost 3,000 tokens, or maybe she was in Series 3 by now, we might not be having this conversation. But we are having this conversation because right now she costs 6,000. I think basically that they got... But what this reveals to me is a sort of fundamental issue, right? These are not... The developers here, even if they are acting in good faith, which I believe they are not gods. They are not going to be able to account for every single scenario that comes up with a new card. They are not going to be able to understand the metagame implications of every card they release. That is not how this works. And so when they release a card like Zabu that sort of synergizes with a card that costs 6,000 tokens, and that card that costs 6,000 tokens is just like the best in slot option in terms of synergy, that is a really problematic issue, in my opinion. So it's not even a question of their intentions, it's a question of the structure of the system. Because the way I see it, this is sort of inevitable. This will happen again. Entirely, even no matter how hard they work to make it not happen, and I do believe they do not want this to happen, I do believe they are acting in good faith. I know that like 10,000 people in my comments will be like, they're just trying to rob you, this is a gotcha game. I don't believe that. I know that. I do believe they're acting in good faith. I also believe that they're human beings and that this situation can and will repeat itself until something changes. And even if cards start rotating into Series 3, that won't change it. Darkhawk is the one that came out this month. It was always going to be 6,000 tokens, no matter what. And so this sort of thing where like these sort of accidental, I would say, confluences of the card we just released really needs this other card, and this other card is really expensive, they're going to be rare, I would think, but they will happen again. And that is a problem. And it's a problem that should be addressed. Because if I climb very easily to infinite with this deck, I mean, granted, I'm in the highest ELO bracket and the highest collection level bracket. I'm playing against people who have this stuff too. But it is tough to feel good about an infinite climb when some of it is just, I bought this card. I bought this card, and that's it. And I played against people who may not have bought this card. And so it doesn't just sort of devalue, to me, the experience of climbing in this game. It devalues, I think, the ability of other people to do the same thing. And it is something that I think should be addressed in the future. Frankly, I'm not a game designer. I pretty much hate when people who aren't game devs give their opinions on what game devs should do. But it is very frustrating that, to me, like, even Shuri aside, Shuri maybe could be Shang-Chi and this deck wouldn't get any worse, but this card is just the best in slot 4-drop. And it costs 6,000 tokens. And you need your best in slot 4-drop if you want to play an optimal Zabu deck. You just do. And that's bad. Because you spent $10 on this, and suddenly you learn that you can't even play the best version of it unless you spend 200 more. And that's a situation that is absolutely critically dire. Because it is basically the worst case scenario for a game that wants to be appealing to players who spend any amount of money and not just whales. That is the worst case scenario. They're in it right now. And I think it is, I would almost say, fortuitous that the release of Zabu highlighted these issues so that they can be addressed, because I do believe Second Dinner cares. I do believe they care a ton about the health of their game. I believe they know what the pain points are here. I believe they are good people who are trying to do their jobs well. I do not believe they are trying to, like, rob you or rob me. But I think this specific situation reveals, I guess you'd call them fault lines in the system here. And that's a problem. These fault lines exist. And they didn't have to get revealed this early, but they did. And now we have to talk about them. Because when your best in slot 4 drop costs $200, that's a big problem. And card gamers are naturally going to want to play the best version of a deck. I didn't even want to play a single Zabu deck until I unlocked Darkhawk. That's a problem. Maybe it's my problem. Maybe it's not their problem. But on some level, if enough people feel that way, it is their problem. So I basically sort of think that they need to take a hard look at the kind of cards they're putting into Series 5. Because if they're putting cards like this into Series 5 that aren't necessarily very exciting, this is not a super exciting card. It's just kind of a generically good stat stick. And they're putting that into Series 5 alongside extremely cool cards like Thanos, Galactus, Null. These are just like really cool, really big things that like it makes sense that they be rare because they're super cool and splashy. But this, I'm not sure it makes sense that this is like that rare. It's just a stat stick. They need to be more discerning with, like, assuming you want to keep Series 5 around, my suggestion would be they need to be more discerning with the cards that start in Series 5, and they need to start starting some cards in Series 4. And that's pretty much where I'm at with it. I think they just need to start starting cards that are not, like, super wild, splashy, ridiculous things in Series 4. I think, like, Sentry, there's no reason that should be Series 5. That's a card that should be in Series 4. That's a card that should be in Series 3. But I think that it is, you know, it's worth talking about this. I also think it's important to note, and I know I've said this a bunch of times, but I have absolutely no patience for people who assume the worst of the devs. We've been given no reason to assume that. I have no patience for that. If they were the people you think they are, they would never have refunded Nexus events. I do not think that they're operating in bad faith. I do think that fundamentally undergirding all of this is their desire to have collections be unique. And I do think that that desire to have collections be unique is fundamentally at odds with the desire of card game players to be able to brew and have the cards that they want. And I think that until they resolve that tension, these issues, these fault lines are going to continue to crop up, right? This fault line that we're seeing now, the Zabu Darkhawk thing, is the result of the tectonic plates of unique collections and what players want getting pushed up against each other, right? And I think that is also what resulted in Nexus events. It's what resulted in all of these things. And until the tension between we want all the cards to be unique and the players who are just like, why would you ever want that? Why won't you just let me buy the cards that I want? Why can't I just play the cards that I want to play instead of waiting on a unique collection mechanic that nobody really wants? Like, I haven't heard anyone be like, oh, I really love the unique collection thing. I haven't heard it. But like, I think my best explanation for why the system is the way it is right now is they want everyone to have a unique collection. That's step one. Step two is, how do you make everyone have a unique collection? And the answer is, make things prohibitively expensive. And so they made things prohibitively expensive because otherwise they just say, like, you can't get this. So they have to, like, make it, like, expensive. That's the gate, right? They put a big price gate in front of all the cards. And what you're supposed to feel is, oh, I don't need all of those. It's fine, I don't need them. But then they release a card like Zabu, and suddenly you do. Suddenly you actually do need that Darkhawk. Suddenly you need that. And that's a big problem. And it's going to happen again. So I think that until these tensions are resolved, we're gonna end up in this situation again, whether it's in a month or a year or 2 years, it's gonna happen again. And the tension between this unique collections mechanic and just how much the player base just wants to enjoy the awesome game that they've made is stark. And it is something I think will have to be addressed. Thanks everyone for listening.